as Matt had mentioned, we will have time near the end of our session here to field any questions that you may have sent to ILC support. And the reason we're doing that, as Matt mentioned, is that so we don't see questions popping up on the screen and distracting during the presentation. But we welcome any questions. Whether you think about it today or if you think about it, you know, tomorrow or whenever, you can get a hold of the McGuire team and through that contact information we're going to give you at the end. And so don't be bashful about asking questions. But we're going to cover a few basic things. What are the benefits of having an effective loss control program? We'll just talk about a few of those right now. We're going to talk a little bit about the definitions of loss control, this magic, these two words that when people throw them around, you know, what does it mean to your organization? You know, I have a definition of loss control based on my experience and where I come from and how I look at things. Each one of you at the onset here has a definition, I think, of what that means. Cost containment, the same thing. If we use that term, what does it mean to your organization? Have you thought about stakeholders, that term of who has a stake in whatever we have in place to manage our programs? What are some of the key elements of the loss control program, the cost containment program? Do you have a work plan? Do you have a strategic plan or a plan of some form that takes you from point A to point B with your program? Setting expectations. What's the return on the investment that you and your management expect to have from putting the time and effort into this? Having a goal or goals is key, because if you don't have those, you have no target. Coordinate and identify resources, information that we have, and coordinating that as well to the stakeholders and others. Provide you with a couple of ideas and examples, and then obviously we have our fielding of questions. The benefits of a functioning loss control program. I threw that word functioning in there because we can say we've got a loss control program, but if we haven't taken it out of the garage and are driving it around the block, it's really not doing what it's designed to do. Obviously, the primary benefit is to protect our human, physical, and financial resources. Achieving and maintaining compliance. You know, compliance is secondary, but there's a lot of regulatory requirements out there that a program can address. Obtaining relevant insurance coverages, you know, obtaining best pricing. And I know Matt and the McGuire team can say, you know, if a client has their house in order and they've got programs in place, it makes market searching a lot easier for them. You know, and the insurance companies are looking more closely at what programs organizations have in place to prevent losses should one happen. And that's the cost containment piece we'll talk about. Securing and retaining clients, customers, and relationships, bottom line money to the organization. We'll talk a little bit about how that works with this. And obviously in the competitive marketplace today, more organizations are requiring its service partners, contractors, suppliers to maintain certain work comp mod rates, certain OSHA accident illness incident rates, and so forth, to even be able to qualify to bid and do work for them. And then, of course, financial institutions are looking at what an organization has in place. If they're going to lend them money for capital expenditures and things like that, are they going to be a good risk to give those funds to? Some of you may or may not have to satisfy what we call third-party requirements. Third-party requirements are your customer or an industry group may require you to submit evidence of your safety programs, your other cost containment programs, and so forth, to be reviewed by a third party they've retained to score your program. ISNet World, Bros are a couple of those third-party reviews. And if you don't maintain the appropriate score, then you're not going to get on that preferred provider list for that particular industry. You even have other organizations requesting documentation of safety programs. Subcontractors, if you're a general contractor or you hire somebody to come in is part of your overall loss control program / risk management program, asking them what they're going to do to be compliant while they provide the services to you. All of this above can return in the form of new business, continued business opportunities, and obviously potential insurance reductions. And I throw that one in there, get a good night's sleep if you got the house in order. One size does not fit all in this conversation that we're having. Really, you need to look at your own organization and say, what do we need to have in place? What works for us? Somebody across the street might have something different. You're all at a different point along this discussion line here. But the fundamental question here is, if you pulled folks together in your organization and you got them in a room and you said to each one individually, if we talk about our loss control program, what picture do you get in your mind's eye? What does it mean to you individually? Hopefully they would all have the same understanding and know exactly what you're going to be talking about because you've done some front-end work on that. And the same goes for the cost containment. If you say, well, let's talk about some cost containment initiatives here, would they even understand that term? So it's really important for you as your own individual entity to look at these two terms and define what they mean for you. And so by the conversation today, we'll hopefully give you some seeds that you can use to add to existing, what you already have, and or add something new. I'm sure you all have things in place. And maybe by the end of this conversation today, you'll just be reconfirming that, hey, we're on the right track, or perhaps we've given you a couple of other ideas to consider. A few things that really need to be considered as fundamental elements to putting a program in place is to identify your stakeholders. Who in your organization and outside your organization needs to be aware of your efforts, communicated with, coordinated with, and so forth. We need to identify resources and coordinate them. Initially, the first step would be to do a risk assessment or a program audit to determine what we need to have in place, what risks are associated with what we do, not only currently, but if you're planning something for the future, you should be thinking about the what if you implement something new, rather than trying to play catch up later on. Working environment evaluations, developing your program once you've decided what those needs are, training your management group, training your supervisors, training your employees so that they all understand their role and their responsibility, keeping records, keeping track of how things are moving along. And then a key part to this, obviously, is the maintenance of this program and a continuous review and then updating it as necessary. I think one of the things that we've seen over time is that organizations will put an effort forth to put these things in place, but they won't look at how they can package these different things and leverage the opportunities that having such a program in place can provide, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about stakeholders. Internal to your organization, have you thought about whether it's your safety program, it's your work comp program, it's your property insurance, it's a fleet program, whatever it might be, who gets involved, who needs to know about what's going on and understand what the desired outcome is. Obviously, human resources manager, a coordinator, training managers, environmental managers, so forth, safety managers, work comp coordinators, if there's somebody that handles your insurance and so forth, and you've got others, it could be finance, it could be whoever it is that needs to be aware of that particular aspect of your overall program. And then you also have to be considering the external stakeholders to your organization. What's it mean to have such a program in place to your current customer or even a prospective customer, that you can show that you're going to be a qualified and dependable supplier of services and products and so forth to them. Various client management representatives, insurance agent, brokers, insurance carrier, outside consultants, regulatory agencies, various vendors even, bankers, subcontractors. If you have a loss control program, have you communicated the requirements that you require of them to do work for you so they don't create risks to your organization as well? So stakeholders are key. Each one of you is going to come up with your own list of those. There's no magic who it is. It's what you start out with. And one of the key things here is this is not something you flip a switch on and it's there. It's a thought process. It's an evolution, if you will. It's like looking into the fog and having it dissipate and seeing clearer as you move along this path what will benefit your organization. I do know that if you're working for somebody or if you own your own business, you do have some level of loss control and cost containment in place right now. You just might call it something different. You haven't packaged it in the way that we're going to be talking about it. I'll bet you most of you have got insurances. You've got personnel or HR policies and guidelines. You've got safety programs in one form or another, emergency action plan. You're compliant with environmental requirements. You've got a business continuity or disaster recovery plan in place. Fleet safety, security, succession planning. Not only succession planning to an organization in who's going to own it, but succession planning in who's going to step in to a certain role within the organization so that if you put things in place that they have the opportunity to succeed because you're giving them an orientation and bringing them up to speed. So succession planning can mean different things. Obviously, employee and management training, not only from an operational standpoint and quality, but you can tie all these things together when you coordinate information. And there's many other things that would be part of your program as well. But chances are you've got some of these in place already. This slide here is just a graphic overview to give you an example of a visual. I'm a pretty visual oriented person, and from ILC's perspective, a fundamental loss control program might have some of these components: the business continuity, environmental compliance, fleet safety, health and safety, human resources, insurances, security, wellness. And then each one of these, it says coordinating information and results, because you might have certain individuals in your organization that have different responsibilities to your programs. But we have to remember to set up some type of a coordinating mechanism so that if we're doing something in one thing, that the people, the stakeholders in the others are aware of that. Determining the needs, one of the most fundamental things that we can do to see and is to stop long enough to look at the nature of our business. What do we do? What compliance requirements do we trigger by the activities that we perform? And also looking at the future things that we might be doing. So exposures and the scope of those exposures. Are they tasks our employees perform? Are they work environments that we work in? Are they information that we manage, that we keep on our server that could have exposures? Is it HIPAA-related information? From the IT side, what are our exposures? Storms, fires, whatever. And if we have certain controls in place, what's the adequacy of those controls to address those major exposures that we've been looking at? Are there certain risks to mergers or acquisitions, either pre that happening, during it, or post? If we're looking for funding to get business loans, doing a risk assessment can help us prepare for presenting to the lending institutions. And then obviously this is all used for developing prevention and cost containment. Program audits or needs assessments, we can do administrative reviews or physical hazard reviews. Once again, based on the nature of the business. So an administrative review is looking at what's required of us and looking at any written programs, policies, and procedures that are in place. How are they written? Where are they kept? Are they current? Are there tasks that these are requiring us to perform? Have we been doing the tasks? Is training required? What training's been given? Have we documented that training, and so forth? That's the administrative review piece. And then the physical hazard review can be like a mock OSHA walkthrough on site. In our administrative guidelines, are they being applied in the field, out in the plant, out in the organization as we expect? And these are some of the things that we could certainly take a look at, all the way from the safety program to the work comp program to our hiring practices and so forth. Work environment evaluations. I put 3 bullets in there: do it once and utilize the outcome to meet multiple needs and opportunities. An example here could be, we were asked one time by a safety director, OSHA was in and told them they needed to be performed job hazard analysis or job safety analysis. And they asked if we could do those, and we said, yes, we could. But I said, you know, who handles your their hiring? Who handles your work comp? Who's your work comp coordinator? What information might they need to help them be successful? And we identified those other folks, and we found what information would be useful to them. So when the on-site visit was done, it only took a few more minutes to gather the essential physical requirements of the jobs, the essential functions of the jobs, the hazards associated with the work environment, whether it was machine guarding, whether it was the use of respirators, hearing protection. All of that information was gathered right at that same time. And then it was packaged for the HR person to be able to use it for interviewing, hiring, showing potential candidates what the work environment was like, for the work comp coordinator to help facilitate early return to work opportunities, for the safety coordinator for safety training, onboarding new employees, and so forth. So design that evaluation and get input from the stakeholders that you've identified earlier, and then package it for those folks. This is kind of the plan, if you will. It's not rocket science, but on the left side, the red little barbell there, it says current program attributes. What are the characteristics of your loss control program today? You know what it looks like. And this audit or this risk assessment will help you clarify how the current status is. And then on the far right, you have the desired program that you want to have in place. And those ideas can come from the risk assessment that you've done, loss control visits from your insurance carrier, your insurance agent, you know, somebody from the McGuire team has ideas and suggestions. Internally, you've identified things. So you've got this laundry list of what you would like your future program to look like. And then you decide what works for you at this point in time. And then we develop a work plan that takes you from where you are today to where you desire to go tomorrow. Things to consider in moving from the left to the right there is the culture. Now, you all have to look at that yourself. Every organization has a certain culture. We don't get in and mess with culture, but sometimes we need to put it on the table and say, is the existing culture a catalyst for getting something done, or is it a barrier for getting something done? And that's where we kind of take a look in the mirror. Then we look at administratively going across that work plan. Who is assigned the responsibilities in our organization for our safety program, for work comp coordinator, for environmental, for human resources, and so forth? And what is the expectation of them? Do they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to be successful in meeting the tasks in the work plan that we've developed? And if they don't, that's no problem. We can put a little coaching and tutoring together. We can help support that individual as they work towards our goals. And then that bottom line, the bottom track, the technical programs, that's actually the easy one. That's where you're writing programs, you're conducting training, and so forth. And as you would imagine, these three tracks kind of move in the same direction, but not at the same speed. So graphically, you can use this approach on any piece of your loss control program that you want to apply it to. Annual work plans, what they can do for you is obviously that it sets and controls expectations. It identifies the interested parties, you get your goals placed on it. You can put routine tasks on the work plan that have to be done every month to support what's been put in place. And then in that same month, you can have another heading called non-routine. That's where these individual tasks that need to be accomplished as you march through time get put. It also can be a place where you will identify the appropriate resource that's going to do a certain thing so that you're not duplicating things and you're not duplicating costs. You can update it as necessary because every day there's new water under the bridge, so adjustments have to be made. I would suggest it be maintained by one individual that's kind of at the rudder on the ship here, but that individual is coordinating with others that are identified on that work plan. It provides continuity throughout changing people and times. So if people that start out with a responsibility to our programs move on in one form or another, or you assign a new responsibility, the next person can step in and not have to reinvent the wheel. It is the rudder on your ship, and it does help you set that expected return on the investment. Some prevention examples. Following the risk assessment, and let's define this real simply. Prevention is a series of coordinated programs, policies, procedures, tasks, training, etc. When implemented, you got to put them out there, and those responsible for certain aspects of it have been given the training, and you're holding people accountable, and these all work together. So that's this series of coordinated programs that work together to prevent or minimize the potential for an undesired, unplanned incident from occurring. A couple of examples would be, and an easy one that Matt referenced right up front, is not just the safety program, but I'm going to look at the safety program here as an example of the prevention side of the fence. This one reflects on Minnesota, but it also reflects on federal states like Wisconsin and so forth. If somebody is assigned to be the safety coordinator for your organization, and you've made that assignment, do you, as the individual assigning that responsibility, understand the depth and the breadth of what you've just given that individual to follow through on? Does the individual who's been assigned that responsibility understand what they've been given? So once again, this kind of graphical overview. And if I recall, Matt, we sent out a large copy of this one with the invite because on the screen or on the notes page, it might be a little hard to see. The bottom line with this is, in Minnesota, we have to have a component of our overall safety program that meets the Minnesota AWARE requirement. And that blue box there identifies the components that must be in that section of your safety program, but that doesn't meet the individual OSHA compliance programs. It's the administrative umbrella that says how we manage our safety program, and hanging down underneath that umbrella are the individual OSHA compliance programs that you trigger based on the nature of your business. If you've got 15 employees or you've got 300 employees, I've seen it where the 15 employee organization has many more compliance programs than the one that has 300 employees, just because the nature of the business that they're performing. is so much different. And each program that is applicable to you will have certain forms, tasks that have to be done, training that has to be done, and record keeping. So understanding, and once these things are in place, they obviously have to be administered to and followed through, and holding employees and supervisors accountable. Easier said than done, I know that, but to prevent things from happening, we have such programs in place. Other loss control programs can certainly include human resources and the others listed there. Back on that graphic of the overall loss control program concept, I had human resources on there as a key loss control component, and it really is. Right from the get-go, how you're hiring, understanding the jobs, what's requiring, and if we don't manage that human resource effectively over time and consistently, we can create situations where we can have losses to the organization. So it's a huge loss control component of our overall program. Security, staff training is important. Obviously, I look at health promotion and wellness as a loss control component as well that can be out there, and so forth. Cost containment. Defining that a little bit, simply put again, it's a series of coordinated pre-planned actions. That's the key here. It's pre-planned. We had the prevention side in place to prevent something from occurring, but if something did happen, what is it that we've got in place that is coordinated and consistent each time something happens? And the folks are trained on it. These are the actions based on the need to prevent further losses and contain costs related to that particular incident. So let's take a look at a couple of them here real quick. Disaster recovery, business continuity. Organizations may have a formal one that may be pretty informal, and it doesn't have to be put together in the right way. It's got to be put together that works for you. There are many potential, obviously, disruptive threats that can occur. This is just a laundry list of them. When we help organizations put these together, we will ask them to go down a list like this and maybe others and check off what are the ones that are key to them to keep their business going tomorrow if something happened. And you'll see probably the 2, 4, 6th one down, pandemic. You know, everybody's supposed to have a pandemic plan in place right now, and a lot of people haven't had those in their business continuity disaster plans, but it's a vital piece. So take a look at those things, and once you've identified those, and this is going to be probably a hard slide for you to see, and I think we sent out a larger one, but the key slices of this one, of the business continuity, would be, you know, a written plan that describes roles and responsibilities, who your internal disaster recovery team is, who's the external disaster recovery team, because you do have folks on the outside that have to be a part of something when it happens. Have you identified key clients or key vendors that have to be notified and coordinated with? Do you have emergency contacts? Do you have specific emergency procedures in place? How are you handling communications, internal and external? Do you have a current asset inventory that can be used if there are insurance claims or you need to restructure, order new things, and so forth? Obviously, your IT or information technology recovery has to be a part of this. Have I trained my management so they understand what we have? Have I trained my supervisors? And have I let our employees know of their responsibilities? At minimum, doing an annual review of this thing to make sure it stays current, because it's certainly easy to put this in place and then forget about it. And then obviously record keeping. So disaster recovery can be key. Workers' comp obviously is a serious cost containment component. It takes a management commitment. It can't concede or succeed without upper management buying into it. We always recommend that you've assigned a work comp coordinator. And one of the keys about that work comp coordinator position is, what is the role and responsibility that you as an organization expect of that individual? Is it just processing a first report of injury and sending it off and getting a few documents and sending those, kind of a coordinator of information? Or there are a lot of other opportunities that that position might be able to leverage for you. Another one would be the roles and responsibilities of individuals, the supervisor's role and out there. It may not be the case within your organization, but history has shown me that when a work comp coordinator, somebody wants to bring somebody back and they're not a whole person, if you will, there will be supervisors and managers that will say, I can't use a part-time, I can't use somebody with those restrictions. And that is a way of saving money if you can get them back to work, even if you have to put them in a different role. Obviously, that relates to your return to work policy, getting everybody on board there. The organization has to support it, employees and management, obviously all in the spirit of cooperation, even if you've got bargaining units. I've seen it work where you're able to cross people from one bargaining unit to another bargaining unit because it's in the best interest of the employee, the organization, and those folks as well. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Key steps: early intervention, timely reporting, timely follow-through. That's really important. Flexible attitude toward job reassignment. I talked about that just a second ago. Work hardening or return to work. Have you identified a list of potential modified duty, light duty, whatever you want to call them, jobs or tasks that you might be able to assign folks to? It could be those that don't normally get done in the day-to-day stuff, but they should be getting done, so that you can at least get somebody back on the job at some percentage. And then obviously to the ability to track an injury and illness. Now this could be loss runs from the carrier. It could be follow-up reports internally, clinic visits and information coming back. Not just getting somebody back, but following this. You should have an expectation that the claim at the carrier's level is being managed and not processed. There is a cost containment team, if you will, that can be put together to work on individual files or claims. That can be your McGuire team representative, your work comp coordinator, your HR coordinator, manager, your safety coordinator, even the claims manager or coordinator at the carrier. You all have a stake in this, as I said, stakeholders, and we say, what are we doing to bring this to successful closure? Once again, in quick review here that we've talked about is key fundamental elements. Who are your stakeholders? What are the resources that we can use? And we got to coordinate those resources. Have we done a look-see to see if we've got risks out there? And also the work environment evaluations. The program development, as I showed you the strategic plan, put all of these things on that work plan. The employee training, the review of the records, periodic reviews and updating that's necessary, and then packaging and leveraging opportunities. And that's the next slide here, is when you have those things in place and you've gone through the cost and the time to put them in there, you as business owners, managers, supervisors, there should be a common expectation of a return on the investment. If you haven't done that, sit down with your group and say, what's the fundamental goal here that works for us? And then build from that. Because when you have those in place, you can come up from the day-to-day activities and look at these types of things to be able to leverage what you've put together and are using. They can be used to improve your insurance market opportunities. You know, help the McGuire agency team can help you find markets. They're gonna be happy to look at that and pick from that what will work for you. Obtaining financing. Over the years, we've helped several organizations go out for capital to expand their company, their operations. And because those lenders, when they get to certain funding levels, want to see key information that shows them that this company is going to be around, that they're going to be successful, that they have a business continuity plan, they have loss control, they have cost containment in place, and things like that. So packaging that, I've got letters back that have said you were a part of our successful obtaining of this, but we really weren't. Our client packaged that. We helped them package it, but they presented it and they had the programs. Also, courting potential customers. You want to be able to show that you're going to be a qualified and a customer, or excuse me, organization that will provide service and products to somebody. You'll be compliant. You won't have business interruptions due to non-compliance or issues. Retaining those hard-earned customers. There's a lot of competition out there for folks, and by having these, communicate your efforts to them in one form or another. Obtaining ISO certifications, whether it's ISO 9000 types, 14001, ISO 26000, which is now the new social, you know, the social partner to the world, basically. It identifies how your organization is going to bleed into society and be a good steward to society. And it also has an environmental and a health and safety component. You can use these programs to meet those needs either on a voluntary basis or on a certification basis. To meet those third-party review requirements that I mentioned earlier, this helps you get new clients and stay with those clients that you've worked hard to get. Meeting merger requirements. If you're requiring an organization, this will help you look at those to see what you're inheriting and so forth. If you're going to sell, on the reverse side, it makes your house look a lot better on that package table. Your image in the industry and the image with the employees can be enhanced, and obviously compliance. I put it at the bottom because if you have all these things in place, you're going to be meeting compliance by default. And there are a number of ways to leverage and market your program. You just need to remember that they are there and how to take advantage of them. We're getting close to the end here. As I mentioned, this is the 3,000 foot. Take a look at what you've got in place, but have a goal. If it's about individual pieces of the program or the overall program, have a goal. Think it through, get your stakeholders involved, start out with a plan. Remember, the plan needs to be fluid, because as you move through this, as I mentioned, every day there's new water under the bridge, and so things need to adjust accordingly. Identify and coordinate those resources, internal and external. Be patient. This is, in some cases, it's like turning an oil tanker with a canoe paddle. It might take a while, but in time you will see that you are there. Put that work plan together and take it a step by step. And I think most importantly here today is do what works for you. We've talked about a number of different things. They may work for somebody and they may not work for somebody else, but give it consideration and then look at what the benefit it will give you. I recognize everybody's got a certain limit to time and resources, and so you got to look at those that you will see getting the biggest return on. And then evaluate what you've put in place and obviously adjust accordingly. You know, a partial system is better than none. With that being said, we've taken the last about 40 minutes here to go through this at a high level. If you have questions, if you've submitted any, we'll take a look at that. And you would be able to get a hold of your team at the McGuire Agency. And if you called us directly, we would check back with the McGuire Agency team too to see if there can be some coordination of that resource as well. But don't be bashful to ask. If you sit up in the middle of the night and make a note, hey, we talked about this, I need to make a call or something, please check in. Questions that we might have here. I don't know, Matt, can you come back in here a little bit? And
yeah, can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, a few questions that I have that I see are generated here. What's the best way to get our employees to buy into our programs? Any suggestions or thoughts?
Yeah, once again, it's looking in the mirror. Are you a public entity, a private entity? Do you have established programs in place? Have there been training sessions to get everybody up to speed as to what their role and responsibilities are? And then has there been accountability? And to restart programs, literally what I just described, sometimes you have to draw a fresh line in the sand. There are organizations that we've been in where they've had the programs in place, but they haven't been really fully implemented, nor have they been fully leveraged and held the supervisors accountable. I mean, people don't like to have confrontation or conflict, but if there's a policy or procedure in place and people have been advised of that and trained on it, and we're not following through on it and enforcing it, what we've had to do in the past is basically draw that fresh line in the sand, meet with the employees and say, we are going to revitalize our program. We've had things in place. We've had personal protective equipment. We've had policies and procedures in place. We may have not done the best job with it at this point, but everybody's starting at a new point. Everybody has a responsibility. You might refresh on that training again so that there's no one who can say, hey, I didn't know that. And then make sure that you're meeting with your supervision separate from that group and talking about the accountabilities that you will have of the supervisors and that the supervisors need to have. Now, there are some training sessions that you can do for supervisors to try. They're part of a team. They don't have to be the individual, a lone island out there. If they have difficulty with addressing one individual or a group of individuals, there might be a peer that can help as well. But kind of a long story on that. But if you've got something in place, I would draw a fresh line, re-engage them in that fashion.
I had one other question here. I think you kind of answered it, but this is a lot, obviously. It's that high-level view. Do you have a recommendation on where an individual company should start or how they prioritize what's the most important to them?
That's a good question. Let me see if I can find my crystal ball. Nope, I don't have it. So I think that's the individual piece of this whole thing. Look at the nature of your business. And when you look at what you do, if it's a service-oriented organization, if you're making products, you've got a manufacturing situation, you have to look at it and say, what keeps the lights on? What do we have to do to keep our employees safe? Because if we have incidents, if we have property damage, if we have injuries or illnesses occurring out there, that will disrupt the ability to deliver whatever you're delivering. So I would look at your occupational health and safety program right up front, because in doing that, you're going to be looking at the tools and the equipment and the work environment that you folks are in. And when you're doing that look, you're going to see some key things that you're going to ask yourself, if this isn't here tomorrow, what is the impact on our organization? So everybody's going to start out with a separate, step on that, or a different step on that. But I would start out looking at your most primary resource, and that's the human resource and what you've got in place to protect it, and then look at that work environment and so forth. But running parallel to that, how do you keep the lights on tomorrow if something happens?
Great, thanks, Mike. I don't think I didn't see any other questions that you hadn't already answered in the in your presentation. I don't know if you had any that were sent individually to you. If not, go ahead.
No, I don't see any. There was one here.
Okay.
Let's see. Nope.
Okay, I think you've answered most other ones that I received here. So what I would say is, Mike, thank you for your time. Everybody, thanks for participating. If you want follow-up, you should have received some contact information on the slides along with what Mike just sent. Please reach out to the McGuire Agency, your individual representative there, and we can certainly steer you in the right direction for next steps. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. Mike, thank you very much. Samantha, thank you for helping to organize this, and we'll talk to everyone soon. Take care.